Capital is abundant. Understanding is scarce. The Dynamo Show goes deep with the new industrialists rejuvenating industry and commerce. Brought to you by Dynamo Ventures. Learn more at dynamo.vc/podcast. Now, here's your host, Madeline O'Farrell.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Dynamo Show. I'm your host, Madeline O'Farrell, and I'm excited to be joined today by Drew Kerr, Vice President and General Manager at xPL Offsite. Drew, thanks for being here.
Absolutely. Hi, Madeline. How are you? Thanks for having me.
I'm doing well. Yeah, of course. Before we dive into the world of offsite manufacturing that you cover at xPL, would love to just get a bit of your personal journey for our listeners.
Absolutely. Not traditional for where I'm sitting here today talking to you about. My personal journey, professionally wise, is through Turner Construction. Spent 19 years now with Turner Construction, 16 of them through the traditional construction management business, and the last 3 working on this xPL endeavor that we're here talking about today. The first year of that, specifically building out the strategy that we've rolled out, and the last 2 years leading kind of the executional state of the company and where it is today. So that's my background. I did not come from what you would expect, I guess, leading this business from a manufacturing and supply chain background, which is what we're mainly focused on. But certainly had some entrepreneurial nature that the company, I guess, saw and provided the opportunity to be part of. And yeah, that's professional background. Personal background, live in Philadelphia. I have a wife, Rachel, and 2 kids, ages 5 and 3, 2 little girls. They definitely keep me busy outside of the work environment, but a lot of fun in seeing them grow up and seeing, the xPL business grow up at the same time. So a lot going on in life today.
Love that. You basically have 3 kids.
For sure.
Well, xPL is a subsidiary of Turner, something that you, as you mentioned, you spun out a couple years ago. Can you tell us a little bit about what xPL actually does and why this is the moment that Turner decided to formalize a business around it?
Yeah. xPL does offsite manufacturing for the construction industry, specifically, I'll say structural, mechanical, electrical products that help speed up the delivery of construction where those applications make sense and provide value. And we can get into a lot of what we're doing today is in the data center industry focused. There are other industries that I'm sure we'll touch on that we are focused on evolving the business into, and we see opportunity into over the next couple of years and beyond. But the data center industry really honed the opportunity for xPL to be what it is today and the opportunity that we have moving forward. And I think that's why Turner started. We have done prefabrication activities within the Turner umbrella for 20, 30, 50 years. And it's just never been a dedicated focus of the company. It's been more of a localized approach to a project where it might have made sense for a specific application, but it was never an entity that the company developed that put a specific focus and drove the change of the culture of the business to a modularized approach and delivery model. With the scale of the data center industry and even just, I'll call it advanced technology industry, whether that's semiconductor, pharmaceutical, energy, EV battery, industrial, all of those markets that are kind of scaling pretty significantly in today's world and what we forecast the future to be, it was the right time to take what we've always done in a localized fashion and centralize it to an individual company that could build a team of experts that really truly understood this to a larger degree versus just a singular project degree, and continue doing it repeatedly again and again and again to better it and continuously improve it to the point where we change the culture and we change the way we build from the past to the future. That's what xPL is all about for Turner right now.
And on that point of kind of changing the way things are done in industry, xPL stands for Exponential Party Logistics, which is kind of a deliberate provocation, right? Traditional construction has general contractors, subcontractors, suppliers. It's very fragmented. and difficult to manage in some cases. Whereas the XPL is kind of concentrating manufacturing, supply chain, field installation under one roof. What do you think kind of breaks in that traditional model? And why do you think this approach works better for maybe meeting the scale of the demand that kind of the data center moment is requiring it and that urgency?
I, it's the supply chain side of our business that I think is really the biggest endeavor, and it's because traditional construction, general construction, hires subcontractors of all disciplines to do work and doesn't and relies on them for downstream supply chain scope and work and delivery, and the general contractor and above doesn't necessarily have as much visibility or control or knowledge even of the supply chain. And that's where the world is going with the scale of the data center industry and the scale of some of the other industries, with the amount of work that is being pumped into the industry. It is disrupting supply chains. It is challenging traditional supply chains. It is causing a demand that has pretty much never been seen. I mean, I've heard people call today's day and age right now, the next industrial revolution that we're living in, that we're gonna read about in history books sometime in the next 50 years. And the industry and the markets were not prepared for the demand that's coming down right now. And therefore, you have to get to a next level of supply chain knowledge and awareness and visibility and control and management. And that 3PL, 4PL, nomenclature that is businesses today, we kind of looked at XPL and said, we want to be at the nth level of supply chain. We want to get as far down into the supply chain as we can to give awareness, to give understanding, to have control, to have management, and to be able to successfully deliver better than anybody in the industry on our projects, because of that level of deep knowledge of the supply chain, to control it and manage it to the needs of the project and the client. And that's where the name of Exponential Party Logistics and XPL specifically came about. And then certainly tying in the offsite, the second part of our name is doing the work offsite, getting into the supply chain to be able to get what we need and then be able to build it in a different location or a different way. That's the merger of XPL and Offsite together to create the company name XPL Offsite. And I think the supply chain piece of that, because everybody understands manufacturing to some degree because of the automotive industry and other industries that are out there, but really truly in the construction industry, understanding and diving deeper into the supply chain, there was a lacking of that. And we're starting to see clients hire firms and companies that are getting deeper in the supply chain and have a deeper understanding and control of the supply chain.
I love your point on the industrial revolution. We like to use the term industrial renaissance here at Dynamo. I think maybe just because we're a team of optimists, and so kind of take that framing. But ultimately, a lot of this data center industrialization moment is just kind of shining a light on the existing bottlenecks that we had kind of across the physical economy today that I'm sure you experienced at Turner, right? Procurement lead times are always longer than you want them to be. It's inefficient to interconnect kind of a large load to the grid, things along those lines. And now we're just kind of seeing all of those challenges to a more like intense degree because of that demand and because of that urgency. So definitely appreciate your thoughts there. When you do work with a hyperscaler, they show up and sign a contract. What actually happens in terms of products coming off of the line? Like, what does standardized and prefabricated mean in the context of a data center where every campus might have some unique specifications?
It is a great question, and we're actually battling that internally right now. We like to throw around the term offsite manufacturing and use manufacturing in the terminology of our day in, day out business. Personally, I don't think the construction industry is ready to truly get to manufacturing status. Manufacturing is a repeated project done again and again and again to drive an efficiency factor through technology, through just repetitive process and tack times and things of that nature. And every construction project is different. Even for the same client building the same thing, just maybe in a different location, you still get something different to some level of degree. And because of that non-standardization in totality, it is more offsite construction and prefabrication today than it is true offsite manufacturing. It's offsite construction with manufacturing principles embedded into it and driven into it to create an efficiency factor that is much larger than what we can get on site with human capital and human labor. And that is what I think we're at today, and I think we're going to be at for the near term until the construction industry can truly figure out a way to design standardization into the products and have a repetitive product be delivered again and again and again, controlled by code and AHJ requirements at different locations across the United States. That'll never, change or be standardized. That's always going to be your limiting factor of standardization. But that could get us to an 80-90% standardization with a 10 to 20% localization. But we're not there yet even. We're still at a 20 to 50% potential standardization, and we've got to drive that standardization factor up higher every single day. And certain clients, especially hyperscalers, are doing that more and more and more. We're seeing a few of the hyperscalers really drive as best as they can the product standardization from campus to campus. And that's helping the industry learn and figure out how to do that more across the different market segments, different build types, and things of that nature. But we're a little ways away from truly getting to a manufacturing state in our industry.
Absolutely makes sense. And maybe using a concrete example to dig a bit deeper on that point you made around efficiency, you had a client who recently had a bit of kind of an emergency project for you, a 30 megawatt deployment that they needed up and running somewhat immediately. And you were able to fabricate the first product in 3 weeks and get delivery and installation completed in 2 months. What actually does it take to execute that operationally? And why is that sort of impossible with the traditional construction model?
It took an army, to be honest with you. We have a sister company named Source Blue, who's a procurement entity on large mechanical and electrical OEM type of equipment. And there's no way we could have done what we did without our partner, Source Blue, and what Turner brought to the table, from a resource perspective across design, across superintending, across engineering, across safety management, across supply chain management. It took an army of every aspect within our company to come together to field that ask and deliver on that ask. And we all had to be in lockstep every single day. And it was not you couldn't do, we had to do what we had to do. Source Blue had to do what they did. Turner had to do what they had to do, but we couldn't focus on just ourselves. We had to focus on each other at the same time to make sure that what Turner does feeds into what Source Blue does, which feeds into what xPL does, which feeds into what our supply chain team does, which feeds into what our on-site installation team does. And so we all had to be in lockstep and in partnership. Otherwise, it never would have worked. And what would have broken in the traditional model is it just never would have happened. There was nowhere near enough time. We had to make decisions on equipment that was readily available in the industry, not what was the right designed equipment for that specific project. So we had to upsize, or we had to pick certain things, or we had to design around a piece of equipment because that was the longest lead time in the pull. And then we had to start manufacturing and start ordering before we were designed. So to do that, you really have to trust your partners to your left and to your right, and the client ultimately, that allowed us that freedom to say, do what needs to get done to get this done, bring all your resources to the table and do it. And we weren't sure we could do it. And halfway through, we were surprised that we had a path to the finish line, and we got there, and it was pretty impressive to see. But traditional construction, way too segmented, way too slow. Decision making would have destroyed the flexibility in the process that allowed us all to do our individual responsibilities while working in tandem and in partnership to make it happen from start to finish.
Your framing on "it takes an army" brought a question to mind, which is, there's a pretty meaningful skilled trade shortage here in the US, and we're facing a pretty steep decline of our industrial electrician workforce. I believe it's 14% by 2030, while at the same time demand is increasing by 25% over that same timeline. What are the labor requirements differences between the traditional construction approach and the approach that XPL takes? And does the XPL method address maybe some of that bottleneck?
We believe it does. There's still labor needed in the offsite manufacturing model, but we do believe it is a reduction of labor need compared to what would be required on an on-site construction project. However, the way we kind of frame it with the value added nature of our business is the projects are getting bigger, and by getting bigger, they're going in more remote locations. We're seeing, and it's challenging and stressing the workforce to get to these remote locations where these mega projects are being built. And therefore, kind of our motto is bring the work to the person, don't take the person to the work. Because us being able to manufacture in an area and a location that is close to home for the workforce, and they can get home every night to see their families, and they don't have to spend hours driving and losing that time in the morning and the afternoons, before and after work. It provides a better work-life balance. It provides a better way of life for the workforce versus having to travel to a remote location in a different area, be set up in a place that may not have the living facilities that are needed to take on 5,000 or multiple thousands of people to deliver a project. So the opportunity to pull workforce back to a location that they call home and go to that location and deliver the same scope, just in a different business model way, we feel is a huge value proposition for the industry to allow big projects in remote locations where they need to be built for whatever the reason may be, the opportunity to succeed. And that's where we feel like, yes, we will reduce the quantity of labor that's necessary by going to the offsite model, but we're also, we believe, better solutioning bring the work to the workforce versus send the workforce to where the work is.
How does automation play a role there as well? I know you use some technology like robotic arms and the Lincoln Python steel cutting systems as well. What kinds of technology are you using on your sites, and how does that maybe address some of the labor pressure as well?
Yeah, we definitely have robotic automation, welding and cutting machines in our facility. We are constantly looking at and reviewing technology opportunities in the market to figure out how could we be more efficient, how could we do more with less, and there's ways to do it. Everybody talks about smart factories today. There's industries that are at that point in time. I don't think the construction industry and the scope that specifically we are doing and others probably similar to us, I don't know if we're ready for smart factory because, again, we're not a true manufacturer. We're not doing the same exact thing again and again and again, 10,000 times in a row. We do 200 modules for a project, and then we retool the line for the next project that might be a different product. And then once that 100 modules is done, we retool the line again for a different project. So the smart factory nature of bringing in the technology that could really drive significant efficiency and reduce significant amount of labor demand in our facility, we're a little ways out from that until we figure out how to drive manufacturing principles into construction products and project deliveries. But there are significant opportunities that we're looking at of Internet of Things, of robotic automation, of robotic transportation devices, and things like that around the factory, things that we can take incremental steps to getting there with over time, hopefully being able to get to where some of these more advanced manufacturing industries are today. We can get the construction industry and specifically our business to that level.
Absolutely makes sense. As you take a step back and think about the hundreds of billions in announced investment that's going into data center infrastructure, how much of that do you think is actually buildable, particularly given maybe some of the differences of the traditional construction methods versus the approach that XPL takes?
with the traditional construction method, I think it's going to be highly challenged, and I do not personally do not believe it's realistic that it would ever be built in the schedules that is demanded, by the clientele that is driving this demand. Modularization and offsite manufacturing and different supply chains and significant more supply chain vendors and poor vendors are going to be needed to keep up with that. I don't even think the businesses of the xPL offsites and the others of the world right now will be enough to keep up with the demand that is being talked about in the industry. And we're talking data centers alone. Once you start overlapping semiconductor and biopharmaceutical and sports stadiums and healthcare projects and industrial facilities and nuclear facilities and defense facilities and everything that's going to keep coming down the pipeline into the marketplace, the labor shortage, the OEMs that supply the major equipment to our projects, unless there's significant expansion across the board, it's unrealistic that the demand that's in the news actually gets built within the timeframes that are being expected and communicated. I think we're a small piece to supporting and helping get there, but I still think it's a too big of demand for the industry of today. And the industry of today has to evolve and change and grow to accommodate the demand that's at us and coming at us in the future.
Absolutely. That's actually a great segue into my next question. I know we've talked about data centers kind of ad nauseum so far, but I know there's also kind of some intent on the xPL side to cover things like you mentioned, semiconductors, EV manufacturing plants, healthcare even. How do you think about sequencing that expansion?
We're already there to some degree, not deeply scaled into those other market segments, but we're already with our parent Turner and the diversification that they have across market segments and the demand of work opportunities that they provide to us. We are already seeing healthcare opportunities. We are already seeing sports stadium opportunities. We are already seeing pharmaceutical manufacturing facility opportunities, industrial food and beverage facility opportunities, obviously data centers and semiconductors. There's talk of, does aviation facilities make sense to look at from a modularized perspective, which we are already doing some things in that segment, but we haven't pushed too far into that, and others. So Turner's diversification allows us the R&D, I'll call it, of looking into those market segments, figuring out where the challenges in their schedules, in their labor force, in their traditional approach, and how can we as xPL support those other market segments via modularized solutions, and then roll them out, do them in a way that we hope is successful, and then scale it from that point forward. And right now, the advanced technologies is an absolute yes for us. We are seeing sports facilities and healthcare facilities definitely make sense for us. And then, some of the other market segments that Turner works in, we'll look at over time to determine, viability and entry point and then scalability, should they make sense. And we can truly provide a value add opportunity there.
Incredibly interesting. Last question for you. Turner's been building for over a century. xPL is kind of a deliberate bet on what the next century of construction looks like. If you were to kind of predict the future a little bit, what does a world look like in which the xPL approach is the dominant form? And what needs to change in the industry in order to make that happen?
I'm going to start with the end of your what needs to change. I think it's the old way of doing business needs to change. It's doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. That definition of insanity. I think that we've got to get out of that mentality to some degree, and be trust and believe in a delivery model. And I'm going to use an example: the curtain wall industry. Right today, when we build a high-rise office tower or a high-rise hospital or anything of that nature, we typically see curtain wall be employed as the exterior facade to any one of these types of facilities. Before curtain wall, all of the framing of the glass would have been stick built. All the panes of the glass would have been installed one by one up the building or down the building or around the building or whatever it might be. Today, you would never build a building in that way. You would utilize a unitized curtain wall system to deliver at the speed and the scale and the complexity that is a facade system in those environments. That has now just been accepted in the industry as the way we do it. That logic and that mentality, with as an example within our industry already, is what needs to move on into the products that we're looking at relative to multi-trade racking, mechanical electrical skidding, volumetric modules that encompass mechanical and electrical systems, looking at healthcare patient rooms as a solution. And you could keep going and going and going. I mean, the residential industry does it today with blocks of modules that builds, apartment and resi towers and condo towers and things of that nature. Getting that industrialized volumetric model into the realm and the world of commercial construction, that's where we've got to go. And that's going to change a mentality over time that has been hard to change and will be hard to change. But all of the factors that are pushing the lack of the labor force, the lack of the traditional supply chain, the demand of the workload, and the speed of the workload is all that perfect storm to drive us right into, going into that model that is going to be a modularized environment in the future. It will never get rid of certain aspects of stick building, but there's certainly going to move, in my opinion, to more and more modularized approaches. And I think Turner sees that. And I think that's what the investment in the xPL business and Turner's parent, the ACS group of companies, is looking at internationally, is how can we create a globalization modularized model to where we can have a client that wants to build anywhere in the world, and we can go and deliver in a modularized format and fashion in an expedited manner to deliver when they want it, how they want it, and where they want it, and meet those demands, versus trying to drum up a traditional design, a traditional supply chain, and a traditional labor force to then go and deliver, because that is proving out to not meet the demand and the schedule requirements across the industry. And as we've learned, as time going on, it's only going to get tighter. It's never going to get longer, in terms of schedule and demand requirements on the client side, as speed to market in a lot of these industries is key for them to being successful. So speed is always going to keep working its way shorter, and modularization is going to keep pushing the ability to be successful and deliver on that. And I think that's what Turner and ACS see as the opportunity, and therefore the investment in xPL and the growth of xPL. And hopefully, what we can become will change the industry over time, and do that as a leading market provider, for both Turner and ACS.
And I think that was a great point to bring us home. Drew, thank you so much for being here today.
Madeline, thank you very much. I really appreciate you thinking about myself and the xPL and Turner Construction businesses. We really appreciate it, and look forward to your audience talking and seeing about this.
Absolutely. And to our audience, thank you so much, as always, for tuning in. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, leave us a 5-star review and tell us what you liked. And be sure to head over to podcast.dynamo.vc to keep up to date with our latest content, or subscribe on the podcast platform of your choice. Until next time.